The sound of a bullwhip cutting through desert air is not a crack. It is a scream. In the autumn of 1874, inside the dusty walls of Prescott, Arizona Territory, that scream would silence 200 souls and ignite a fire that would burn corruption to the ground. But before we talk about the whip, we need to talk about the woman who stood in front of it. Her name was Nayland, 23 years old, 5'9", shoulders broad as any man's in the territory, hands that could lift a 100-pound sack of flour without trembling, skin the color of desert sand at sunset, hair black as Apache night, always tied back with a strip of worn leather, eyes that held the depth of someone who had learned to see without being seen, half Apache, half white, fully rejected by both worlds. Prescott in 1874 was a town trying to forget it was built on stolen land. The Apache Wars were winding down. The government was forcing the remaining tribes onto reservations, promising food and protection while delivering neither. And in the middle of all that broken faith and stolen dignity, there was Nayland, living proof that some bridges cannot be burned, no matter how hard people try. She worked a back room of Caldwell's General Store, hauling supplies that grown men struggled with. Every morning at dawn, she arrived. Every evening at dusk, she left. In between, she carried the weight of flour, salt, grain, and the crushing burden of being invisible. The townspeople called her the half-breed, never to her face, but loud enough that she could hear. She had learned long ago that silence was the only armor that never rusted. If she spoke back, she was aggressive. If she cried, she was weak. If she ignored them, she was stupid. There was no winning, only surviving. On this particular October morning, the air had that sharp bite that promised winter was coming early. Nayland was loading the third flour sack onto the wagon when Marcus Caldwell stepped out of the saloon across the street. 26 years old, clean-shaven, expensive hat tilted at an angle that said he had never worked a day in his life. Deputy sheriff's badge pinned to a vest that cost more than Nayland made in 6 months. He saw her struggling with the weight and smiled. Not a kind smile. The smile of a man who enjoyed watching others suffer. "Careful there, squaw," Marcus called out, loud enough for the morning crowd to hear. "Don't want you sweating on the merchandise. Might lower the value." Laughter rippled through the men standing outside the saloon. Nayland kept her eyes on the wagon bed. Laughter rippled through the men standing outside the saloon. Nayland kept her eyes on the wagon bed, a habit burned into her by 12 years of survival. "Leave her be, Marcus." The voice came from across the street. Sam Wheeler, 62 years old, the town blacksmith, hands like iron from 40 years of shaping metal. One of the few people in Prescott who looked at Nayland and saw a human being. Marcus turned, his smile fading into something harder. "Just having fun, old man. No law against talking, is there?" "There's a law against being a jackass," Sam said quietly, "but nobody seems to enforce it." The men outside the saloon shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's face reddened. He was about to respond when something changed in the air. A shift, a tension, like the moment before lightning strikes. A horse appeared at the end of Main Street. Not just any horse. A massive Appaloosa gelding, spotted coat gleaming in the morning sun, 15 hands high, muscles rippling under that distinctive blanket pattern. The kind of animal that could carry a man through a blizzard and come out the other side ready for more. And the man on that horse, Ezra Callahan. Though most people knew him by his Cheyenne name, Bear Strike. 35 years old, 6'4", 240 pounds of mountain-weathered muscle, beard black and thick, shot through with premature gray, hair long, tied back with rawhide, wore a coat made from bear hide, scarred leather pants, and moccasins lined with wool. A Sharps buffalo rifle rested across his saddle. A Colt revolver sat on each hip. A knife the size of a small sword hung from his belt. But it wasn't the weapons that made people step back. It was his eyes, gray as winter storm clouds. The eyes of a man who had seen civilization and chosen the wilderness. The eyes of someone who had walked away from everything people thought mattered and found peace in places where most men would die. He did not ride to the saloon, did not wave, did not acknowledge the stares. He guided his horse directly to Sam Wheeler's blacksmith shop, dismounted with a heavy thud that shook the boardwalk, and pulled a bundle from his saddle. Nayland was sweeping the porch of the general store, trying to make herself invisible, as usual, when he walked past. He was enormous. Not just tall, but dense, like an old-growth oak that had weathered 1,000 storms. People stepped out of his way instinctively, not from fear, from respect for something wild that had chosen, for the moment, to walk among them. He smelled of pine resin, old leather, and wood smoke, the smell of high country, the smell of freedom. As he passed, Marcus Caldwell stepped deliberately into his path, drunk on morning whiskey and the need to prove something to the men watching. "Watch where you're going, savage." Ezra stopped. He did not turn his whole body, just his head, slowly, the way a wolf turns when it hears something not quite right in the forest. He looked at Marcus, then his eyes slid to Nayland, who was clutching her broom, terrified of the violence brewing in the space between these two men. For a second, the mountain man's gaze lingered on her. There was no mockery in it, no disgust, no pity. Just a flat, assessing look, the way you might look at another traveler on a long road and recognize without words that they too knew what it meant to walk alone. Then he looked back at Marcus, said absolutely nothing, and kept walking. Marcus, robbed of the confrontation he craved, looked foolish. His face flushed red. He turned his anger on the easiest target available. He kicked dirt toward Nayland's feet, sending dust onto her clean apron. "What are you staring at, half-breed? Get back inside." Nayland hurried through the door, but her heart was hammering. Not from fear, from something else, something she had not felt in 12 years. For the first time since she could remember, a white man had looked at her and had not laughed. Inside the blacksmith shop, Ezra laid out his requirements. Simple, direct, no wasted words. "Need my horse reshod. Front left is loose, and I need supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, ammunition for the Sharps." Sam nodded, examining the horse's hoof. "You planning to winter in the high country again?" "Always do." "Gets lonely up there." Ezra's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Loneliness is better than the company of liars." Sam chuckled, a dry sound like wind through dead leaves. "Can't argue with that, though we're not all bad down here." "Never said you were, Sam." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Sam reshaping the shoe, Ezra checking his rifle. Then Sam spoke again, voice lower. "That girl you passed, Nayland, she works for Judge Caldwell." "Saw her." "She's a good person, strong, smart, but the town treats her like garbage because her mother was Apache." Ezra continued cleaning his rifle. "World's full of fools." "World's full of cowards," Sam corrected. "There's a difference." 2 days passed. Ezra camped outside town, preferring open sky to the confines of a boarding house. He came into Prescott only when necessary. On the 3rd day, he entered Caldwell's general store just after noon. The bell above the door chimed. The light in the room seemed to dim as his massive frame filled the doorway. Nayland was alone, counting inventory. She turned and froze. Up close, he was even larger than she remembered. But there was a strange gentleness in how he moved. Careful, aware of his own size and strength. "You carry supplies?" His voice was gravel, rough from years of not using it much. "Yes, sir. What do you need?" "Flour, salt, coffee, and ammunition. 4570. Nayland nodded, moving to the shelves. She felt clumsy, painfully aware of her size in the narrow aisles. She reached for a tin of coffee on a high shelf. Her worn dress strained at the seams. She could feel his eyes on her, and shame burned in her chest. "Let me." He reached over her shoulder, his arm brushing past. No comment about her height or her body or anything else. He simply grabbed the tin and placed it on the counter. "Thank you," she whispered, keeping her head down. "You carry heavy things all day," Ezra said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. It is my job." "You are strong." Nayland flinched, waiting for the insult that always followed. The joke, the laughter. It did not come. Ezra looked her directly in the eye. "Strength is rare. People who mock it are usually weak themselves." Before Nayland could respond, the door banged open hard enough to rattle the windows. Judge Lucius Caldwell strode in, 48 years old, round belly pressing against an expensive suit, face like weathered saddle leather, eyes sharp with the intelligence of a man who had learned to profit from other people's suffering. Behind him came Sheriff Thorne and Marcus. Behind them, 2 more deputies. "That's him," Marcus shouted, pointing at Ezra. "That's the one who robbed the Apache supply wagon." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Ezra did not flinch, did not reach for the Colt on his hip, though his hand twitched, a reflex born from years of survival. "You are making a mistake," Nayland said. Her voice surprised her, steady, clear. "He has been here for 10 minutes. How could he have robbed a wagon?" "Shut up, Nayland." Judge Caldwell's voice was ice. "This doesn't concern you." "The wagon was hit 3 hours ago near Black Mesa," the sheriff added, nervous. "We found tracks leading to his camp by Granite Creek, found the empty strongbox there." It was a setup. Even Nayland, with her limited knowledge of crime, could smell the rot of it. The supply wagon had been carrying rations for the Apache reservation, the same rations that had been mysteriously short for months, the same shortages that had left children hungry while Judge Caldwell somehow got richer. "I did not take your gold," Ezra said calmly, "and if I had, you would not be standing here breathing." Sheriff Thorne pulled his gun. "Hands up, Callahan. Don't make this messy." Ezra looked at Nayland. He saw the fear in her eyes, not for herself, for him. He calculated the odds. 3 armed men here, more outside. If he started shooting, innocent people would die. Nayland would be in the crossfire. He slowly raised his hands. They pistol-whipped him anyway. Marcus struck him across the temple with the butt of his revolver. Ezra went down on one knee. Blood trickled into his beard, but he did not make a sound. Not a grunt, not a curse. Nothing. They dragged him out into the street. News traveled fast in Prescott. By the time they hauled Ezra to the town square, 200 people had gathered. They were not there for justice. They were there for a show. And Judge Caldwell was more than happy to give them one. "This man," Caldwell bellowed, standing on a crate like a preacher, "is a thief. He steals from honest citizens. He preys on our town. He lives like an animal, and now he acts like one." "He is innocent!" Nayland shouted. She had followed them out, her apron still dusted with flour. "Ask Sam Wheeler. He was at the blacksmith shop. He could not have done this." The crowd turned to look at her. Laughter rippled through them like wind through grass. "Go home, half-breed," someone yelled. "Go back to your people," another voice added. Nayland pushed through the crowd, using her size to part the sea of bodies. Sam Wheeler saw him. "Ask Sam. He will tell you." Sam was there, standing near his shop. Their eyes met across the square. Nayland saw it in his face. The conflict, the fear. Sam Wheeler owed Judge Caldwell money, a loan for his shop. If Sam spoke now, if he stood as witness, Caldwell would call in that debt. Sam would lose everything. Sam looked down at his boots and said nothing. "See?" Marcus grinned. "No alibi. Tie him up." They dragged Ezra to the whipping post, a thick timber buried 8 feet deep in the earth, stained dark from years of use. Blood and sweat and tears soaked into the wood like prayers that were never answered. They stripped him of his bear coat and his shirt. The crowd went silent for a moment. Ezra's back was a map of violence. Scars from bear claws, knife wounds, bullet graze marks. The history of a hard life written in raised white tissue across dark skin. They lashed his wrists high above his hand. 20 lashes, Judge Caldwell announced, for theft and resisting arrest. Then we hold him for the circuit judge. Marcus grabbed the whip. It was a drover's bull whip, 12 feet of braided leather, heavy, tipped with a popper that could crack bone. Marcus had never used one before, but he was eager. He wanted to break this mountain man, wanted to show the town he was strong. "Don't do this!" Nayland screamed, but 2 deputies held her back, their hands rough on her arms. Ezra rested his forehead against the wood. He breathed slowly, preparing for pain. He had survived worse. He had survived blizzards that froze elk in their tracks. He had survived battles. He would survive this fool and his leather toy. The first lash struck. Crack! Ezra's muscles seized. A red welt bloomed instantly across his shoulder blades, but he did not cry out. The second lash. Crack! A grunt escaped him, low, almost animal. The third lash cut skin. Blood began to run. Marcus was enjoying it. He put his shoulder into each swing, laughing between strikes. "Not so tough now, are you, bear man? Where is your growl?" By the 10th lash, Ezra's knees were buckling. The pain was blinding. White-hot fire consuming every nerve. His vision blurred. He was slipping into shock. Marcus stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "He is barely conscious. Boring." He turned the whip around, gripping the heavy wooden handle like a club. He aimed for the back of Ezra's head. A blow there could kill, could crack the skull like an egg. No. It happened in a blur. The deputies holding Nayland had relaxed, their attention on the show. Nayland was strong, stronger than they realized. She shoved them aside with the force of someone who had spent 12 years carrying weight that should have broken her. She did not run. She charged. 240 pounds of muscle and bone and accumulated rage. She had the momentum of a freight train. She threw herself between Marcus and the bound, bleeding man. She turned her back to shield Ezra, wrapping her large arms around his waist, burying her face against his blood-slicked side. Marcus had already started his swing, not with the handle. He had brought the whip back around for one more vicious, uncontrolled strike aimed at Ezra's neck. The whip screamed through the air. It did not hit Ezra. It wrapped around Naelin's back. The leather dug deep into the soft flesh of her shoulder. The popper ripped downward across her dress, shredding fabric and skin beneath in one terrible motion. The sound was wet, heavy, wrong. Naelin did not just scream. She shrieked. A sound of pure, shocking agony that tore through the square and froze every soul present. She collapsed, her weight dragging down on Ezra's bound arms, her blood mingling with his, soaking into the dirt, staining the post. The crowd went silent. Hitting a man, even an outsider, was justice. Whipping a woman, even an outcast like Naelin, violated something fundamental, something the frontier still held sacred. Marcus stood there, the bloody whip trailing in the dust, his face drained of color. "I didn't mean to. She got in the way. It is her fault. The stupid cow got in the way." Ezra Callahan opened his eyes. The pain in his back was gone, replaced by something cold, something dark, something that had been sleeping for years and was now very, very awake. He felt the warm blood of this woman on his legs, heard her whimpering against the post, felt her body shaking with pain and shock. He lifted his head. He did not look at the crowd, did not look at Marcus, or the judge, or the sheriff. He looked at the rope binding his wrists, and he pulled. It was not a human pull. It was the torque of an animal that realizes it is going to die if it does not escape. The hemp groaned. The wood of the post creaked. His biceps bulged until the veins looked ready to burst. Snap. The rawhide strip holding his right wrist gave way. The sound was louder than a gunshot in that terrible silence. Ezra freed his other hand. He did not rub his wrists, did not check his wounds. He dropped to his knees beside Naelin and placed one massive, gentle hand on her trembling shoulder. "Easy," he rumbled. His voice shook with a fury that seemed to vibrate the ground itself. "Easy now, brave one." He stood, slowly, blood running down his back in rivulets. He turned to face Marcus. Marcus dropped the whip, took a step back. "Now look, Callahan. It was an accident. I did not mean to hit her. You saw it." "She jumped in front. It is not my fault." Ezra took one step forward. The entire town of Prescott held its breath. They expected him to roar, expected him to charge, expected violence. But Ezra Callahan did something much more terrifying. He bent down and picked up Naelin Miller in his arms. She was a large woman, strong, heavy, the kind of body that people mocked, the kind of weight that was supposed to be a burden. Ezra lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all, as if she were made of feathers and light. He held her against his bare, bloody chest, cradled her like something precious. He looked at Judge Caldwell. He looked at Sheriff Thorne. He looked at Marcus. "You had your turn." His voice was low, quiet, but it carried to every corner of the square. "Pray to your God, because I am coming back, and when I do, I am taking this whole corrupt town with me." He turned, walked through the parted crowd, carrying this woman who had bled for him, this stranger who had taken a whip meant to kill him. No one moved to stop him. No one dared. The mountain man had spoken, and Prescott, Arizona territory began to tremble. The town doctor, Isaiah Webb, was a man who preferred horses to people. Horses did not lie. They did not pretend to be something they were not. They did not build corrupt empires on the backs of the suffering. But when Ezra Callahan kicked open his surgery door, carrying Nayland like a broken bird, Dr. Webb did not hesitate. He was 56 years old, gray-haired, thin as a rail fence, hands steady from 30 years of cutting into flesh and putting it back together. He had been a Union Army surgeon during the war, had seen young men torn apart by canister shot and grape, had learned that the human body could endure horrors that would break the spirit. "Put her down," Dr. Webb said, clearing his examination table with a sweep of his arm. Jars and instruments clattered to the floor. "Gently, man, gently." Ezra laid her on the cold leather as if she were made of glass. Nayland was drifting in and out of consciousness, her face pale against her dark hair, beads of sweat standing out on her forehead like morning dew. The back of her dress was ruined, cheap cotton soaked through with crimson. "I need to cut the dress off," Dr. Webb said, reaching for shears with hands that shook slightly. "And I am going to need whiskey, a lot of it. For her, maybe for me." Ezra did not move toward the door. He stood at the head of the table, a towering shadow in the dim lamplight. His own back was still raw, blood drying in streaks down to his belt. But he seemed unaware of his own pain. All his focus was on the woman before him. "You should not be here," Nayland mumbled. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy with shock. "They will come for you." "Let them come." It was the first time he had spoken since the square, his voice low, a rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. "Doctor." Webb began cutting away the fabric. When he peeled back the last layer over her shoulder blade, even this hardened veteran of battlefield surgery hissed in a sharp breath. The whip had done terrible work. The leather had carved deep into muscle, a jagged valley across her skin that would scar badly, would ache in cold weather for the rest of her life. But she would live. She was built strong. Stronger than the porcelain dolls who pranced around town in their fancy dresses and complained about the heat. "Nayland," Dr. Webb said softly, holding up a bottle of amber liquid. "Drink this. All of it." She choked it down, coughing as fire burned her throat. Ezra reached out with one massive hand and gently wiped a drop of whiskey from her chin. That hand could snap a man's neck, could break bone. But his touch was impossibly tender. The stitching was brutal. There was no ether in Prescott, no chloroform, only whiskey and grit and the ability to endure. Dr. Webb gave Nayland a leather strap to bite down on. She screamed into it, muffled, agonizing sounds that tore at the silence of the room. Every time she screamed, Ezra flinched. This man who had taken 20 lashes without a sound looked like he was being torn apart by her pain. He took her hand in his. His hand completely engulfed hers, rough, calloused, a tool of survival, but his grip was an anchor. Nayland held on like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. It took an hour. By the end, Nayland had passed out from exhaustion, her body finally surrendering to mercy. Dr. Webb wiped his bloody hands on a rag and poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey. He drank it in one swallow. Then he looked at Ezra. "She will live. She is built stronger than most, tougher than those society ladies who faint at the sight of blood." Ezra stared down at Nayland's sleeping face. The shame that usually clouded her features was gone, replaced by something peaceful, innocent. "Why did she do it?" Ezra asked. It was a genuine question. In his world, you looked out for yourself. Self-sacrifice was a quick way to die. Dr. Webb sighed, sitting heavily on a stool. Because this town has spent 12 years telling Naylin she is worthless. Today, she decided to prove them wrong by saving a man they deemed even more worthless than her. He took another drink. And because she has a heart the size of this territory, and Prescott does not deserve her. Ezra ran a thumb over Naylin's knuckles, his touch reverent. They hurt her to get to me. They hurt her because they enjoy it, Dr. Webb corrected. You were just convenient. Marcus Caldwell is a vicious little cur whose daddy owns the kennel. Judge Caldwell has been skimming off the Apache rations for 2 years, selling them to traders in Albuquerque. He needed a show today to distract folks from the fact that the reservation children are starving while he buys new land. Ezra's eyes narrowed, darkening like storm clouds before lightning. He uses suffering as distraction. That is about the size of it. Ezra gently released Naylin's hand. He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening street of Prescott. The saloons were lighting up. Piano music drifted on the cold wind. It all looked so normal, so civilized. "Doctor," Ezra said, not turning around, "keep her safe tonight. If anyone comes through that door who is not me, you shoot them." Dr. Webb opened a drawer and pulled out an old Navy Colt revolver. He placed it on his desk. "Where are you going?" Ezra turned. The look on his face made the doctor shiver. It was the look of a man who had decided to stop being prey. "I need my rifle, and I need to go hunting." Night fell on Prescott like a blanket over a corpse. Ezra did not leave through the front door. He moved through shadows, silent despite his size. Years in the mountains had taught him how to become invisible, how to read the wind, how to know where eyes were looking and where they were not. He retrieved his gear from where the deputies had dumped it behind the jail. They had taken his money, taken his knife, but they had left the Sharp's rifle, thinking it too heavy and clumsy for close quarters fighting. They were wrong. Ezra rode his Appaloosa 5 miles north to a hidden cache he maintained in a limestone cave. There he dressed his wounds with bear grease and pine tar. Primitive medicine, but effective. He bound his ribs tight with strips of cloth, checked his ammunition. 50 rounds for the Sharps, 100 for the Colts. When he emerged from that cave 2 hours later, he was no longer just a man. He was something the Cheyenne whispered about around winter fires. He was the thing that came down from the high places when the balance was broken. He was the storm made flesh. But Ezra was not a fool. He could not attack Prescott head-on. Caldwell had 30 deputies and the town walls. Ezra needed to bleed them first, needed to take away their security, their money, their arrogance. He knew exactly where to start. According to the wagon tracks he had seen days earlier and the hushed conversation he had overheard at Sam Wheeler's blacksmith shop, Judge Caldwell was moving stolen goods tonight. Apache ration supplies, flour, salt, dried beef, meant for starving children, being sold to traders for profit. The shipment was traveling through Black Mesa Canyon to avoid the main trail patrols. It was worth thousands of dollars, and it was moving right now. Ezra rode hard, cutting across open prairie under a cold moon. His horse was tired but willing. They reached the canyon 2 hours ahead of the wagons. Black Mesa Canyon was a narrow throat of red sandstone, shadowed even in daylight. At night, it was a place where sound echoed strangely, where the wind howled through gaps in the rock like the voices of angry spirits. Ezra dismounted. He gathered dead wood and brush, and then he did something audacious, something insane. He built a bonfire right in the center of the trail. By the time the lead wagon lumbered around the bend, lanterns swinging wildly, Ezra had a fire leaping 10 feet high, flames casting dancing shadows against the canyon walls, turning the passage into something from a fever dream. The wagon convoy ground to a halt. 3 wagons, 6 outriders, and leading them, bundled in a sheepskin coat and looking miserable, was Marcus Caldwell. His father had sent him on this run, thought it would toughen him up after his embarrassing display with the whip, make him a man, teach him responsibility. It was going to teach him something, but not what his father intended. "What in hell is this?" Marcus yelled over the wind, pulling his horse up short. "Who is there? Move that fire!" A figure stepped out from behind the flames, silhouetted against the firelight, 8 feet tall in shadow, wrapped in furs, holding a rifle that looked like it belonged to a different age, a weapon for killing buffalo, for stopping charging grizzlies, for sending a message. "It is the mountain man," one of the guards whispered, his horse dancing nervously beneath him. "It is Bear Strike." Marcus tried to sound brave. His voice cracked. "Damn it, Callahan, get out of the road. You are a wanted man. I have 6 guns here." Ezra said nothing. He just stood there, immovable as the stone walls around them. Then, slowly, he raised the Sharp's rifle. He did not aim at Marcus. He aimed past him, at the lead wagon driver. Boom! The roar of the buffalo gun was deafening in the confined space. The bullet passed so close to the driver's head that his hat flew off, punctured by a clean hole through the crown. The man yelped and dove off the wagon seat, scrambled into the rocks. The horses screamed and reared. Chaos erupted in an instant. The guards pulled their pistols, fired wildly at the figure by the fire. Bullets kicked up dirt around Ezra. One tugged at the fur of his coat. He did not move. He calmly cracked the breech of the Sharps, ejected the smoking brass casing. The metallic sound echoed like a bell of judgment. He slid a new cartridge in. The click-clack of the reload was a sound of pure terror to the men facing him. "Next one takes a leg off," Ezra called out. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the wind and the gunfire and the screaming horses. "Leave the wagons. Walk away. Live." The guards looked at Marcus. They were hired men, loyal only to money. They were not paid enough to fight a ghost with a cannon. "Shoot 'em, you cowards!" Marcus screamed, but his voice was high, desperate. The guard closest to Marcus spat on the ground, holstered his gun, turned his horse around. "This is not my fight, Caldwell. Your daddy did not pay me to die in a canyon." One by one, the other 5 guards turned and rode back the way they came, leaving Marcus alone with 3 wagons full of stolen goods and a mountain man who looked like death itself. Marcus sat on his shivering horse, staring across the fire at the man he had whipped hours earlier. All the bravado drained out of him, leaving only the spoiled, frightened child beneath. Ezra walked around the fire, approaching slowly, each step deliberate. He grabbed the bridle of Marcus's horse and jerked the animal still. He looked up at the mayor's son. "Please," Marcus whispered, his teeth chattering. "My father, he will pay you, whatever you want." "Your father has nothing I want." Ezra reached up and grabbed the front of Marcus's expensive sheepskin coat, ripped him out of the saddle like a man picking an apple from a tree, threw him onto the hard-packed dirt. Marcus scrambled backward on his hands and feet. You are going to kill me." "No." Ezra walked past him to the lead wagon. He pulled a burning brand from the bonfire, tossed it into the canvas covering of the wagon. The dry fabric caught instantly. Flames leaped into the night sky. Ezra moved down the line, torching all 3 wagons. The surveying equipment inside began to burn and melt. Brass theodolites, expensive telescopes, barrels of flour that could have fed children, all of it going up in smoke. Thousands of dollars turning to ash. Ezra walked back to where Marcus was cowering in the dirt. The boy was illuminated by the inferno of his father's stolen future, his face streaked with tears. Ezra crouched down. They were eye level now. The smell of burning canvas and wood smoke filled the air. "You hurt her," Ezra said, his voice like grinding stones. "You drew her blood because you are small, and you wanted to feel big." Marcus could not speak, could only shake his head desperately. "Do you feel big now?" Marcus shook his head again. "Good." Ezra stood up. "Go back to your father. Tell him the mountain man is not gone. Tell him I am just clearing the brush before I burn down the house. Tell him Naylin sends her regards." Ezra turned his back on the sobbing man and walked away into the darkness, leaving Caldwell's fortune burning bright against the Black Canyon walls. The war for Prescott had begun. Snow came to the town in the night. It fell thick and silent, blanketing the mud and the blood of the previous day in pristine white. But inside Dr. Webb's surgery, the air was hot and heavy, with the smell of laudanum and wood smoke. Naylin lay on her stomach, her face turned toward the frosted window. The pain in her back was a dull, throbbing beast that woke with every breath. But worse than the pain was the memory. She closed her eyes and saw the whip falling, saw the disgust in Marcus's eyes, felt the crushing weight of her own body pressing into the dirt. A shadow blocked the moonlight streaming through the window. Naylin flinched, gasping as her stitches pulled. The window sash slid up silently. Cold air rushed in. And then Ezra Callahan climbed over the sill like a phantom. He shut the window behind him and turned to her. He looked different. The wildness in his eyes had settled into something harder, colder. He smelled of smoke, not wood smoke, the acrid chemical smell of burning varnish and canvas. "You are awake," he said softly. Moving to the stove to warm his hands, "You should not be here," Naylin whispered, her voice raspy. "The sheriff has men patrolling every street. They have orders to shoot on sight." "They are looking for a man on a horse. They are not looking for shadows." He pulled a wooden chair to the side of her cot and sat down. The wood groaned under his massive frame. He looked at her, really looked at her, in a way that made Naylin want to pull the sheet up over her head. She felt exposed, hideous. A woman of her size, scarred and broken, lying before a man who looked like he was carved from the mountains themselves. "Why did you come back?" she asked, tears stinging her eyes. "Why did you not just ride for the high country? You were free." Ezra reached out. His hand hovered for a moment, then rested gently on her hair. His fingers rough, stained with soot, but his touch was incredibly light. "A man does not leave his debts unpaid, and he does not leave his shield behind." "I am not a shield," Naylin said bitterly. "I am just big. I am just a fat Apache girl who got in the way." Ezra leaned forward, his face inches from hers. The intensity of his gaze stopped her breath. "Listen to me, Naylin. Up in the high country, the skinny wolves die first. The pine tree that is too thin snaps in the wind. You have weight. You have substance. That is not weakness. It is an anchor. He gestured to her bandages. You took a blow that would have killed a smaller woman. You absorbed it. You saved my life, not by accident, but because you were strong enough to take the hit and still stand. Nayland stared at him. No one had ever spoken about her body as if it were a tool, a fortress. They only spoke of it as failure, as something to mock, to fix, to hide. I burned his wagons, Ezra said, changing the subject, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble. Caldwell's shipment. 3 wagons full of stolen goods. It is ash in the canyon now. Nayland's eyes widened. He will kill you. He will burn the whole town to find you. Let him try. He is bleeding money now. He will get desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. Ezra stood and moved to the small table where Dr. Webb kept supplies. He picked up a bowl of broth the doctor had left, brought it back to the bedside. You need to eat. You need to keep your strength. He fed her. It was an intimate act, quiet, that defied the violence of their world. This mountain man, whose hands were trained to kill, carefully spooned broth for the woman who had been the town's punching bag. For the next 2 days, Ezra was a ghost. He slept in Dr. Webb's root cellar during daylight, vanished into the night when darkness fell. Meanwhile, the mayor's mansion was a scene of chaos. Marcus had returned, sobbing, smelling of smoke, with news of the destroyed shipment. Judge Caldwell smashed his imported crystal decanter against the wall, the sound of shattering glass like his breaking composure. He is mocking us. A savage is dismantling my empire. He pointed a trembling finger at Sheriff Thorne. You cannot even find him. He is not human, Judge, the sheriff stammered. My boys are scared. They say he turns into smoke. They say bullets pass through him. Superstitious nonsense. Caldwell paced his study like a caged animal. If the town will not give him up, we squeeze the town. If the doctor is hiding him, we squeeze the doctor. He walked to his desk, unlocked a drawer, pulled out a heavy bag of gold coins, the last of his reserves. Send a rider to Tucson, Caldwell hissed. I want hired guns, professional killers, men who do not believe in ghost stories. Get me Frank Yates and his crew. Sheriff Thorne swallowed hard. Yates? Judge, those men are animals. Good. Fight fire with fire. 3 days after the whipping, Prescott felt different. The air was charged, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Dr. Webb was exhausted, tending to Nayland, hiding Ezra, lying to deputies who came asking questions. It was taking its toll. You have to leave, Webb told Ezra on the evening of the 3rd day. They are searching house to house. They will be here by morning. Ezra was in the cellar, cleaning his Sharp's rifle. The smell of gun oil filled the small space. If I leave, they take her. If you stay, they kill you both. Before Ezra could answer, the sound of shattering glass came from upstairs. Heavy boots stomped on floorboards. Search the place. Turn it over. It was Sheriff Thorne's voice. Ezra grabbed his rifle, his muscles coiling like springs, ready to explode into violence. No, Dr. Webb whispered urgently, putting a hand on Ezra's chest. There are too many. If you start shooting from down here, they will burn the house with Nayland inside. Webb rushed up the cellar stairs, closed the trap door, threw a rug over it. Upstairs, the front door of the surgery had been kicked in. Sheriff Thorne stood there with 4 deputies. All had drawn guns. But behind them were 4 new men. Strangers. They wore long dusters, low-brimmed hats. They carried Winchester repeaters and moved with the easy, deadly grace of professional killers. Frank Yates and his crew had arrived. "What is the meaning of this?" Dr. Webb demanded, standing in the hallway, trying to sound outraged instead of terrified. His right hand twitched toward his coat pocket, where the Navy Colt rested. But 8 armed men filled his doorway. If he drew now, they would kill him and burn the house with Nayland inside. The gun was useless. "Harboring a fugitive," the sheriff spat. "Where is he?" "I have not seen Callahan since the whipping. I am treating a patient." One of the hired guns pushed past the doctor. A man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. Cold eyes that had seen too much death and felt nothing about it anymore. He walked into the patient room where Nayland lay. Nayland was sitting up, clutching the sheet to her chest, terrified. But her jaw was set. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Get up," the man said, his voice flat, bored. "She cannot move," Dr. Webb protested, rushing in. "Her stitches will tear." The man backhanded Dr. Webb without looking at him. The doctor crumpled to the floor, dazed. The hired gun grabbed Nayland by the arm, right over her wound, and yanked. Nayland screamed. It was sharp, jagged. Fresh blood bloomed on the back of her nightdress. "We are taking her to the jail," the man announced, dragging her toward the door. "Public enemy, accomplice to arson." They hauled her out into the street. Nayland stumbled, her legs weak, her bare feet dragging in the snow. The cold bit into her skin, but the pain in her back was all-consuming. "Ezra!" She did not mean to yell it, but it ripped out of her throat. "Do not come! Run!" They threw her into a wagon, drove her down Main Street while curtains twitched in windows. The townspeople watched, hidden, afraid. They saw Nayland, the woman who had carried their flour and swept their floors, being dragged through the mud like an animal. And they did nothing. At the jail, they locked her in a cell, not a room, a cage of iron bars in the center of the sheriff's office, like she was something to be displayed, something less than human. Judge Caldwell walked in, looked at her with pure contempt. "Comfortable?" he sneered. Nayland said nothing, just wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. "You are going to stay here until your mountain man comes for you. And when he does, my new friends will cut him to ribbons." He turned to the hired guns. "Postmen on the roof, men in the stable across the street. If a dog barks, shoot it." The trap was set. But in the ventilation grate of Dr. Webb's cellar, Ezra Callahan had heard everything. He had heard Nayland scream. He had heard the blow that struck the doctor. He had heard them take her. He did not burst out in rage. The red mist that usually descended on men in battle did not come. Instead, a glacial calm settled over his mind. Cold, clear, precise. He waited until the heavy boots faded, until Dr. Webb groaned upstairs. Then Ezra emerged from the cellar like death rising from the earth. He helped the doctor into a chair. Webb wiped blood from his split lip. "They took her." "I know. They have 10 men, maybe 12. 5 are professionals." "I know." Ezra walked to the window, looked at the jailhouse down the street. It was lit up like a beacon, a trap, an invitation. "You cannot attack the jail," Dr. Webb warned, his voice shaking. "It is suicide." Ezra turned, his face a mask of cold determination. "I am not going to attack the jail. I am going to turn this town against them." And for the first time since Nayland was taken, Dr. Isaiah Webb smiled. The cold bit deeper as night settled over Prescott. In the jail cell, Nayland wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to think about the pain. The iron bars were close, too close, like a cage built for an animal, which, she supposed, was exactly what they thought she was. Through the barred window, she could see torches being lit around the building, men moving in shadows, the hired guns taking positions, waiting for Ezra to walk into their trap. She whispered a prayer in Apache, the language her mother had taught her before the missionaries took her away, before Father Duncan convinced her that her own tongue was the devil's language. Usen, protect the one who protected me. Across town, in Dr. Webb's surgery, Ezra was moving with quiet purpose. He had stripped down to just his shirt and pants, boots replaced with soft moccasins, the Sharp's rifle left behind, too loud, too visible. Instead, he carried only a knife and 2 pieces of rope. "What are you planning?" Dr. Webb asked, watching this transformation with growing unease. "Fire," Ezra said simply, "and truth." He moved to the back window. "When you hear the church bell ring, gather everyone you trust, Sam Wheeler, Mrs. Pritchard, anyone who is tired of being afraid. Bring them to the square." "How many do you think will come?" Ezra looked at him. "Enough. People are not as cowardly as they believe themselves to be. They just need someone to go first." He disappeared into the darkness. Dr. Webb stood alone in his surgery, staring at the broken door, the overturned furniture, the blood on his floor. He thought about his daughter Emma, how Ezra had saved her from bandits 2 years ago, rode into a camp of 6 armed men alone, and walked out carrying an unconscious girl. Never asked for payment, never asked for thanks. Webb opened a drawer, pulled out the old Navy Colt, checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. He was 60 years old, too old for heroics, but apparently not too old to pay his debts. He walked out into the snow toward Sam Wheeler's blacksmith shop. The church of Prescott sat at the northern end of town, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower that could be heard for miles. It was built in 1868 by settlers who believed that civilization meant white walls and Christian hymns. Father Duncan lived in a small room behind the sanctuary, 68 years old now, bent with arthritis, hair white as the snow falling outside his window. He was reading his Bible by candlelight when he heard the soft knock. He opened the door. Ezra Callahan stood there like a ghost, silent, immense. "I need your bell," Ezra said. Father Duncan should have been afraid, should have called for help, should have slammed the door. But he looked into the mountain man's eyes and saw something that stopped him. Grief, deep and old and never fully healed. Why? To wake people up. Father Duncan stepped aside. "The rope is in the tower. Ring it as long as you need." Ezra moved past him, then stopped. "The girl you took from her mother 12 years ago, Nayland, do you regret it?" The old priest's face crumpled. "Every day." "Good, because tonight you get a chance to make it right." Ezra climbed the narrow stairs to the bell tower. The church bell was heavy, cast iron, inscribed with words from Psalms. He gripped the rope and waited. Timing was everything. At the mayor's private warehouse behind the general store, Marcus Caldwell was doing inventory. His father had ordered him to count every last barrel and crate. Make sure nothing else went missing. Make sure there was no more evidence of the skim operation. Marcus hated this work, hated the dust, hated the cold, but mostly he hated himself. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Nayland's face, heard her scream. He had not meant to hit her. He really had not. But his father said it did not matter. Said she was just a half-breed. Said worse things would happen if they showed weakness now. Marcus was beginning to understand that his father was not the man he had believed him to be. He was counting sacks of flour when he smelled smoke. Not wood smoke. Chemical. Wrong. He turned. Flames were crawling up the far wall, fast, impossibly fast, like they had been fed with kerosene. "Fire!" Marcus screamed. "Fire!" He ran for the door, but the door was blocked from outside, jammed. He threw his shoulder against it, once, twice. On the third hit, it gave way. He stumbled out into the alley just as the roof caught, flames leaping into the night sky, painting the snow orange and red. Men came running with buckets, but it was too late. The warehouse was an inferno. And then, cutting through the chaos, came the sound of the church bell. Bong. Deep, heavy, urgent. Bong. Not the rhythmic toll of Sunday service. This was frantic. A warning. A call to arms. Bong. 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 All across Prescott, people woke, grabbed coats, stumbled into streets. What was happening? Was it Indians? Was it bandits? The hired guns on the jailhouse roof spun around, rifles raised, trying to find the threat. "What the hell is that?" Frank Yates shouted. "Church bell," Sheriff Thorne said, confused. "But why would Father Duncan ring it now?" Inside the jail cell, Nayland heard the bell. She pressed her face to the bars, hope flickering in her chest like a candle in wind. And then came the second explosion. Not at the jail, not at the church. At the livery stable on the east side of town, where Judge Caldwell kept his prize horses, where the ammunition for the deputies was stored. The blast was enormous. Wood and hay and smoke erupting into the sky. The horses, bless them, had been let loose minutes before. They stampeded down Main Street, adding to the chaos. Hooves thundering, eyes wild with terror. Men dove for cover. Women screamed. Children cried. "He is destroying the town!" Marcus yelled, running toward the square. But he was wrong. Ezra was not destroying the town. He was destroying the Caldwell holdings, their wealth, their power, their ability to control through fear. And in the middle of it all, the church bell kept ringing. By now, people were flooding into the square. 50, then 100, then more, confused, frightened, angry. Dr. Webb stood on the steps of the church, Sam Wheeler beside him. Mrs. Clara Pritchard, who had mocked Nayland just days ago, stood there too, her face set with determination. "People of Prescott," Dr. Webb shouted over the noise, his voice cracking, "listen to me!" The crowd quieted slightly. Faces turned toward him, faces lit by firelight from the burning warehouse. 3 days ago, you watched them whip an innocent man. You watched a woman take a lash meant to kill him, and you did nothing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Caldwell has been stealing from the Apache reservation for 2 years, selling rations meant for children, buying land with blood money. And when someone stood up to him, he tried to silence them with violence. "That is a lie," Sheriff Thorne pushed through the crowd. "Where's your proof, old man?" Sam Wheeler stepped forward. He held up a ledger, the real ledger, the one Judge Caldwell kept hidden. "Here is your proof. 2 years of theft, $40,000 stolen from people who were already starving. My son tried to report it. He had an accident at the reservation, an accident that was no accident at all." The crowd gasped. People knew Sam's son. Good boy. Honest. Dead at 23. You are all fools, came a new voice. Judge Caldwell himself strode into the square, face red with rage. Marcus trailing behind him like a whipped dog. That mountain savage has you believing his lies. He is a criminal, a thief, and the half-breed is his accomplice. Her name is Nayland. The voice came from the edge of the crowd, deep, resonant. Everyone turned. A figure stepped into the firelight, not from the shadows, from the church tower itself. Ezra Callahan climbed down from the bell rope, dropped the last 10 feet to land in a crouch, rose to his full height. He was covered in soot, unarmed except for the knife on his belt, but he radiated a quiet, terrible power. Her name is Nayland, Ezra repeated, and she has more honor in one finger than this entire town has in its collective soul. "Arrest him!" Caldwell screamed. But the deputies did not move. They looked at each other, at the burning warehouse, at the ledger in Sam Wheeler's hands, at the faces of their neighbors who were starting to understand the truth. "I will not arrest him," Deputy Collins said quietly. He had been a lawman for 15 years. He was tired of corruption, tired of being on the wrong side. He unpinned his badge, dropped it in the snow. "Neither will I," said another deputy. One by one, 5 of the 8 deputies stepped away from Judge Caldwell. Frank Yates and his hired guns stepped forward, rifles raised. "We will do it. That is what we are paid for." "You are paid to murder," Ezra said calmly. "But can you murder 200 witnesses?" Frank hesitated. He was a killer, but he was not stupid. Killing one man in an alley was one thing. Killing in front of the entire town was another. And then something happened that no one expected. A sound rose from the darkness beyond the town, a sound that made hearts stop and blood run cold. Apache war cry. 12 mounted warriors rode into Prescott, not attacking, not threatening, just riding, deliberate, powerful. They formed a line at the edge of the square. At their head was a man of about 30, tall, muscular, face painted for war. He carried no gun, only a lance and a bow. He dismounted, walked directly toward Ezra. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. The 2 men faced each other. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the Apache warrior said in perfect English, "You are the white man who helped our people reach the northern mountains 2 summers ago. You gave us food, horses, asked for nothing." Ezra nodded once. "I did what was right. I am Dakota, and I have come for my sister." The square went completely silent. "Sister?" someone whispered. Dakota turned to face Judge Caldwell. "The woman you hold in that cage, Nayland, she is my blood. You took her from our mother when she was 12 years old, told our mother that Nayland chose your world. Our mother died believing her daughter hated her." His voice shook with controlled fury. "I have searched for 10 years, and now I find her here, caged like an animal by the men who stole her." He turned to the crowd. "We came tonight because we heard that a half-blood woman stood against injustice. We knew it could only be her. My sister always had the heart of a warrior." Mrs. Pritchard stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I am ashamed. We are all ashamed. We let fear make us cruel. We let this man," she pointed at Caldwell, "convince us that some people matter less than others." Tears ran down her face. "But that girl took a whip for a stranger. She showed us what courage looks like. And we repaid her, by locking her in a cage. More voices rose from the crowd. "Free her! Let Nayland go! Caldwell is the criminal, not them!" Judge Caldwell looked around wildly, his empire crumbling like sand. "You cannot do this. I am the law here." "No," came a new voice, strong, clear. "You were never the law. You were just a thief with a gavel." U.S. Marshal John Cooper rode into the square, 52 years old, badge gleaming in the firelight. 2 federal deputies flanking him. "Judge Lucius Caldwell, I am placing you under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder." "Marcus Caldwell, you are charged as an accomplice." "You have no authority," Caldwell sputtered. Marshal Cooper held up documents. "I have a federal warrant, and I have Sam Wheeler's testimony. And I have 200 witnesses who just heard you threaten citizens of this territory." He turned to Frank Yates. "You and your men can ride out now, or you can hang with them. Your choice." Frank looked at Ezra, looked at the 12 Apache warriors, looked at the 200 angry townspeople. He lowered his rifle. "We are leaving." The hired guns mounted up and rode into the darkness. They were killers, but they were also survivors. They knew when to fold. Sheriff Thorne unlocked the jail. Nayland stepped out into the cold night air. She was shaking, weak, but when she saw Dakota, her legs nearly gave out. "Little sister," Dakota said softly. "10 winters I searched." "I thought you died," Nayland whispered. "Father Duncan told me you were killed in a raid." "He lied to keep you here." Father Duncan stepped forward from the church steps, his face wet with tears. "I lied. God forgive me, I lied. I thought I was saving your soul, but I destroyed your family. I am so sorry, child." Nayland looked at him, at this old man who had taken everything from her, who had meant well but caused such harm. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "You believed you were right. I cannot hate you for that." Ezra walked to where Nayland stood. She looked up at him, this mountain man who had come to town for salt and bullets and stayed to burn down corruption. "You came back," she said. "I told you, I do not leave my shield behind." And then, in front of the entire town, Ezra Callahan did something that would be talked about for 50 years. He knelt. This giant of a man, this legend of the high country. He knelt in the snow before a half Apache woman that society had thrown away. "You saved my life," Ezra said. "You taught me that courage is not about being fearless. It is about doing right when you are terrified. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Nayland reached down, touched his scarred face. "You already have." The crowd erupted in cheers, not loud, not celebratory, but relieved, like something poisonous had been lanced and they could finally breathe clean air again. Marshal Cooper took the Caldwells away in chains. The fires burned themselves out. And as dawn broke over Prescott, the snow continued to fall, covering the scars, giving the town a chance to start fresh. But the real work was only beginning. The morning after the fires, Prescott woke to a different world. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear and cold and impossibly blue. The kind of blue that makes you believe in new beginnings, even when everything around you smells of ash. Nayland sat on the steps of Dr. Webb's surgery, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her back still ached. The stitches pulled with every movement. But she was free. The iron bars were gone. The cage was empty. Dakota sat beside her, her brother, the boy she had thought dead for 10 years. He was a man now, strong, scarred. changed by time and war and loss. But when he looked at her, she saw the child who used to catch lizards with her in the Arizona sun. "Tell me about Mother," Nayland said softly. Dakota was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old grief. "She never stopped looking for you. Every trading post, every mission, every town. She would ask if anyone had seen a girl with dark eyes and Apache blood." He paused. "Father Duncan told her you chose to stay, that you wanted to be white. It broke something in her. She died believing you had rejected her." Nayland closed her eyes. The pain of that was worse than any whip. "I tried to find you. They would not let me leave. They said you were all dead, that the army had killed everyone." "Most of us were killed," Dakota said, "but some of us ran, hid in the mountains. Your friend, the mountain man, he found us 2 winters ago. We were starving. He gave us food, ammunition, told us about safe passages north, asked for nothing." "Why did he help?" "I asked him that. He said he was tired of watching innocent people die for other men's greed. He said he had seen enough death at a place called Sand Creek." Nayland understood then. Ezra carried his own ghosts, his own guilt. Helping her, helping Dakota's people, was his way of trying to balance scales that could never truly be balanced. "Where is he now?" Nayland asked. "Training," Dakota said with a slight smile. "Come, you should see this." Behind the blacksmith shop, in a cleared area of snow, Ezra stood stripped to the waist despite the cold. His scarred back was on full display, the fresh wounds from the whip still angry and red. But he moved like they did not exist. Sam Wheeler was with him, and 3 of Dakota's warriors. They were teaching each other, the Apache showing Ezra how to move silently across gravel, how to read tracks in snow. Ezra showing them how to reload a revolver in darkness, how to break a man's grip without killing him. Mrs. Pritchard was there too, and her 15-year-old son, Daniel, and 2 farmers whose names Nayland did not know, all of them learning, preparing. "Preparing for what?" Nayland asked. "The trial," Dakota said. "Marshal Cooper will take the Caldwells to the federal courthouse in Santa Fe 3 days from now. But Frank Yates and his men left town. That does not mean they left the territory. Hired guns do not walk away from money. They will try to free Caldwell on the road." "So we are going too," Nayland said. "Not a question. We are going too." Ezra saw her then. He stopped mid-motion, walked over. His chest was steaming in the cold air, covered in a sheen of sweat despite the freezing temperature. "You should be resting," he said. "I am tired of resting. I am tired of being the one who needs protecting." Something shifted in Ezra's eyes. Respect. "Then come train with us. But your stitches are fresh. Nothing that pulls the shoulder. Agreed?" "Agreed." For the next hour, Ezra taught Nayland how to fall without landing on her injury, how to use her weight as a weapon instead of a weakness, how to pivot and throw a smaller opponent over her hip, how to stand so that no one could easily knock her down. "You are strong," Ezra said, "stronger than most men I have known. But you fight like you are apologizing for existing. Stop apologizing. Take up space. You have earned it." By the end of the session, Nayland was breathing hard, sweating, her stitches screaming. But she was also smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in years. Mrs. Pritchard brought water. "You are a natural," she said. Then, more quietly, "I am sorry for how I treated you, for how I taught my son to see you. I was wrong." Nayland took the water, drank deeply. "Thank you for saying that. It matters." "If we are riding to Santa Fe, I am coming too," Mrs. Pritchard said. "My husband died 3 years ago. Caldwell bought our land for half what it was worth. Told me I had no choice as a widow. I want to see him face justice. One by one, others came forward. People with grievances, with stolen land, with dead sons and broken promises. By noon, 23 citizens of Prescott had volunteered to ride with Marshal Cooper. But there was one person whose support mattered most, and he had not spoken yet. That evening, as the sun set over the territory, Father Duncan came to Dr. Webb's surgery. He carried a worn leather satchel. His hands shook as he set it on the table. "I am old," he said without preamble. "Too old to ride to Santa Fe. Too old to fight. But I can do this." He opened the satchel. Inside were documents, letters, records. Every conversation I had with Judge Caldwell, every bribe he offered to keep me quiet, every time he threatened someone into silence, I wrote it down. I told myself I was gathering evidence, but really, I was just too much of a coward to act. He looked at Nayland with red-rimmed eyes. "You were 12 years old when I took you from your mother. You cried for days, begged me to take you back. I told you it was God's will, but it was not God's will. It was my arrogance, my belief that my way was the only way." Father Duncan knelt, this old priest with arthritis so bad his knees cracked like gunshots. He knelt before Nayland just as Ezra had. "I cannot undo what I did. I cannot give you back those years. But I can give you this, my testimony, my shame, written down so that everyone knows the truth about Lucius Caldwell and about my own sins." Nayland helped him stand. "I told you before, I forgive you. Hate is too heavy to carry." "How can you forgive so easily?" "Because my mother taught me that holding anger is like holding a hot coal. You are the one who gets burned." Father Duncan wept then, not quietly, but with the deep, shaking sobs of a man who had carried guilt for too long. Nayland held him, this man who had stolen her childhood. She held him while he broke apart and then slowly put himself back together. When he left an hour later, he walked differently, straighter, lighter. "You are good at that," Ezra said from the doorway. "At what?" "Healing people. You did it for me, for him. Maybe that is your gift." Nayland thought about that, about how she had spent years feeling useless, worthless, when really she had been carrying the medicine her mother gave her all along. The next morning, Marshal Cooper assembled everyone in the town square. 23 citizens, 12 Apache warriors, Ezra, Dr. Webb, Sam Wheeler, even young Daniel Pritchard, who at 15 wanted to be part of history. "We leave at dawn tomorrow," Cooper said. 3-day ride to Santa Fe. Judge Caldwell and Marcus will be in a prison wagon, guarded, but we expect trouble. Frank Yates does not give up easy, and Caldwell still has friends in this territory. "How many men does Yates have?" Sam asked. "Last count, 7, plus whoever Caldwell can buy between here and Santa Fe. So we might be outnumbered." "Probably," Cooper said bluntly. "That is why I am asking for volunteers, not demanding. If you want to stay, I understand. You have families, lives." No one left. That night, Prescott held something it had not had in 2 years. A town meeting. Not ordered by Judge Caldwell, not controlled by his cronies, just people gathering in the church to talk about their future. Sam Wheeler stood at the front. "We need a new sheriff. Thorne resigned this morning, ran off in the night like the coward he is. I nominate Deputy Collins. He stood up when it mattered." Collins looked shocked. "I am not qualified." "You are honest," Sam said. "That is qualification enough." The vote was unanimous. Then someone raised another question. What about the reservation? Who will be the new Indian agent? Silence. No one wanted that job. It was hard, underpaid, and required actually caring about Apache welfare. I will do it, Sam said quietly. My son died because of Caldwell's corruption. I will make sure no other parent loses a child to greed. Again, unanimous. Then Mrs. Pritchard stood. And what about Nayland? She has no home now. Caldwell owned the building she lived in. Where will she go after the trial? Nayland had not thought about that. In all the chaos, she had forgotten that she was, once again, displaced, homeless. She comes with me, Ezra said. He had been sitting in the back, silent. But now he stood. To the mountains, if she wants. Every eye in the church turned to Nayland. She felt her face heat, felt the weight of expectation, the old shame starting to creep back. But then Dakota spoke. My sister belongs to herself, not to me, not to this town, not even to her rescuer. The choice is hers. Nayland stood, her legs shaking. I do not know what I want yet, but I know this. I am tired of being told where I belong. For the first time in my life, I get to choose, and that is enough for now. The church erupted in applause, not mocking, not pitying, but genuine, celebrating her autonomy, her right to decide. As the meeting ended and people filed out into the cold night, Ezra waited by the door. When Nayland passed, he spoke quietly. I did not mean to pressure you about the mountains. You do not owe me anything. I know, Nayland said, but I am thinking about it. What is it like up there? Ezra looked toward the dark peaks visible in the moonlight. Quiet, cold, honest. The land does not lie, does not pretend to be something it is not. You work hard or you die, but there is a freedom in that, a clarity. Are you lonely? I was, Ezra said, until 3 days ago. Their eyes met, held. Something unspoken passing between them. Not love, not yet, but possibility. The seed of something that could grow if given time and care. We should rest, Nayland said. Tomorrow will be hard. Tomorrow will be the easy part, Ezra replied. It is the day after we need to worry about. In his cell, Marcus Caldwell could not sleep. He lay on the hard cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to his father snore in the next cell. Judge Caldwell slept like a man without conscience, like none of this was his fault, like the world had wronged him instead of the other way around. But Marcus could not stop seeing Nayland's face. The moment the whip hit, the sound she made, the way she fell. He had told himself it was an accident, that she jumped in the way, that it was not his fault. But he knew better. He had wanted to hurt someone, anyone, because his father made him feel small, and hurting people weaker than him was the only way he knew how to feel big. Now here he was, locked in a cage, facing 20 years in Yuma Territorial Prison, all because he never learned that real strength is not about domination, it is about restraint. There was a small window in his cell. Through it he could see the church, could see people moving inside, building something he had spent his whole life trying to tear down. Community, trust, decency. For the first time, Marcus Caldwell felt something he had never experienced before. Shame. Real, crushing, inescapable shame. And he had no idea what to do with it. At dawn, 23 citizens, 12 warriors, 2 lawmen, 1 doctor, 1 blacksmith, 1 former priest, and 1 mountain man, prepared to ride. They were not an army. They were just people who had decided that enough was enough. Marshal Cooper addressed them one last time. "We are 3 days from Santa Fe. 3 days for Yates to make his move. Stay alert. Trust each other. And remember, we are not looking for a fight. We are looking for justice." "And if they give us a fight anyway?" Sam asked. Cooper smiled grimly. "Then we give them one they will never forget." The wagon rolled out of Prescott as the sun broke over the eastern peaks. Judge Caldwell and Marcus sat chained inside. The citizens rode alongside. Apache warriors scouted ahead and behind, and Ezra rode point with Marshal Cooper, his Sharps rifle ready, his eyes scanning every ridge and gully. Naylin rode near the middle. She was still weak, still hurt, but she was riding, not hiding, not apologizing, taking up space. As Prescott disappeared behind them, she looked back one last time, at the town that had rejected her, the place that had taught her she was not enough. Then she turned forward, toward the unknown, toward the future, and she smiled. The ride to Santa Fe should have taken 3 days, but Marshal Cooper was cautious, smart. He chose routes that avoided open ground where ambushes could hide, led them through narrow passes and along ridge lines where attackers would have to expose themselves. On the first night, they camped at Red Rock Canyon. The walls glowed orange in the sunset like the inside of a furnace. Takota's warriors kept watch on the high ground. Ezra walked the perimeter, checking sight lines and escape routes. The townspeople huddled around fires, nervous energy keeping them awake. Naylin sat apart from the main group. Her back still throbbed. The stitches pulled every time she dismounted or reached for something. But she refused to complain, refused to be the weak link. Dr. Webb came to check on her, changed her bandages by firelight. "Healing well," he said. "No infection. You are tough as boot leather." My mother used to say that Apache women are made of stone and sky. The stone keeps us grounded. The sky reminds us to stay free. Your mother was wise. She was. And I never got to tell her I loved her before she died. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "I think she knew anyway. Love does not need words. It needs action. You took a whip for a stranger. That is the kind of love she taught you." Naylin had not thought of it that way. But maybe the doctor was right. Maybe everything her mother gave her was still alive inside her, still guiding her. Ezra approached with 2 tin cups. Coffee, strong enough to strip paint. He handed one to Naylin and sat beside her on a flat rock. "Tomorrow we cross the mesa," he said. "Open ground for 5 miles. If they are going to hit us, that is where they will do it." "How many do you think Yates has now?" "Maybe 10, maybe 15. Depends on how many men Caldwell could buy from here." "We are only 36. Numbers do not win fights. Conviction does. Yates is fighting for money. We are fighting for something bigger." Naylin sipped her coffee. It was terrible. She loved it. "What are you fighting for, Ezra? Really?" He was silent for a long time, staring into his cup like the answer was written in the grounds. "Redemption," he finally said. "I told you about Sand Creek, how I saw women and children killed. I did not pull a trigger, but I did not stop it either. I ran away to the mountains, convinced myself that if I lived apart from civilization, I was not part of its sins." He looked at her. "But you cannot run from guilt. It follows you. finds you in quiet moments, in dreams. The only way to face it is to do better, to stand up when it matters, even if you are scared, even if you might lose. You are not running now. No, because you showed me how to stand still. Their fingers touched on the rock between them, just barely, but neither pulled away. Across the camp, Marcus Caldwell sat chained inside the prison wagon. He could hear the conversations, the laughter, the sense of purpose, everything he had never had. His father was asleep, snoring, untroubled. Even now, facing 20 years in prison, Judge Caldwell slept like a baby. Marcus envied that, the ability to do terrible things and feel nothing. But he could not do it, could not shut off the part of him that knew right from wrong, the part his mother had given him before she died when he was 10. He thought about Naylan, about how she had forgiven Father Duncan so easily, how she carried grace instead of rage. Maybe redemption was possible, maybe even for him. The second day was harder. They crossed the mesa as planned, wide open, exposed. Every shadow looked like a rifle. Every rock could hide an enemy. But no attack came. By nightfall they reached Copper Creek, a small settlement, 20 buildings, 1 saloon, 1 general store, and a telegraph office. Marshal Cooper sent a wire to Santa Fe, confirming their arrival timeline, requesting additional federal marshals to meet them at the courthouse. While he was inside, Sam Wheeler noticed something. 3 horses tied outside the saloon, lathered with sweat, ridden hard, and on one saddle, barely visible in the failing light, was a mark, a brand, the Yates Gang brand. Sam found Ezra immediately. "They are here, in the saloon, at least 3 of them." Ezra looked at the building. Light spilled from the windows. Piano music. Laughter. Normal sounds. But underneath, the tension of predators waiting. "How do you want to play this?" Sam asked. Carefully. Ezra gathered Dakota, Marshal Cooper, and 5 others. They approached the saloon from multiple angles. Cooper and his deputy went through the front. Ezra and Dakota through the back. Sam and 2 townspeople covered the windows. Inside, Frank Yates sat at a corner table with 2 of his men. They were not hiding, not pretending. They were waiting, confident. 3 against 30 was bad odds, but they were not planning to fight here. They were scouting, learning the convoy's strength, looking for weakness. When Marshal Cooper walked in, Frank smiled. "Marshal, fancy meeting you here." "Yates, you are a long way from Tucson." "Free territory. I can ride where I want." "True, as long as you are not planning anything illegal." Frank spread his hands. Innocent. "Just having a drink. No law against that." Cooper knew he could not arrest them. They had not done anything. Yet. But he needed to send a message. Let them know this convoy was not an easy target. "Enjoy your drink," Cooper said. "But know this. We have 36 armed citizens, 12 Apache warriors, and every single one of them has a reason to see Judge Caldwell face justice. If you get in the way, you will not walk away." Frank's smile did not waver. "Noted." But his eyes flicked to the back door, where Ezra had just emerged. The mountain man filled the doorway like a natural disaster. His Sharps rifle slung across his back, his hands loose at his sides, ready. For a moment, the 2 men stared at each other. Predators recognizing predators. Frank had killed 17 men in his career, but looking at Ezra Callahan, he had the distinct feeling that he was looking at number 18 if he made the wrong choice. "We should go," one of Frank's men muttered. Frank stood slowly. "Good luck with your trial, Marshal. I'm sure justice will be served." They left their drinks half-finished, mounted their horses, rode into the darkness. Sam watched them go. That was too easy. "They are not giving up," Ezra said. "They're just changing the plan. They know we are ready now, so they will wait until we are not." "When will that be?" "Tonight, while we sleep." Marshal Cooper called an emergency meeting. Everyone gathered in the stable where they were keeping the prison wagon. "Yates knows where we are. He has probably already sent riders to gather more men. By tomorrow, he could have 20 guns waiting for us on the road to Santa Fe." "So what do we do?" Mrs. Pritchard asked. "We do not wait for tomorrow. We ride tonight." There were murmurs of protest. They were tired. The horses were tired. Riding in darkness through unfamiliar territory was dangerous. "Dangerous for us," Cooper agreed, "but also unexpected. Yates will expect us to camp here, get a good sleep, leave at dawn. If we leave now, we gain 6 hours on him, maybe more." Dakota spoke up. "My warriors can ride ahead. Clear the path. If there is an ambush waiting on the main road, we find it first." "Good. We leave in 1 hour. Eat. Rest your horses as much as possible. And pray we make it to Santa Fe before Yates catches up." They rode through the night like ghosts. 36 exhausted people, 12 silent warriors, 1 prison wagon, moving through darkness with only moonlight to guide them. Nayland's back screamed with every jolt of the saddle, but she did not complain, did not ask to stop. She bit down on her pain and rode. Around midnight, one of Dakota's scouts returned, riding hard. He spoke to his leader in rapid Apache. Dakota's face darkened. "There is a blockade ahead, 4 miles, 20 men, maybe more. They have felled trees across the road, set up positions on both sides." "Can we go around?" Cooper asked. "Not with the wagon. The terrain is too rough." They were trapped, between Yates behind them and an ambush ahead. "We fight," Sam said simply. "We are outnumbered," Dr. Webb pointed out. "We have been outnumbered from the start," Mrs. Pritchard said. "That has not stopped us yet." Ezra stepped forward. "We do not fight, not directly. We make them think we are going to fight. Then we do something else." "What?" "We send the wagon through empty." Everyone stared at him. "The Caldwells transfer to horses, disguised, hidden among us. We send the wagon ahead with 1 driver who jumps off before it reaches the blockade. When Yates attacks an empty wagon, we circle around behind and hit them from their weak side." It was insane, risky, could go wrong in 100 ways. "I like it," Cooper said. They spent the next hour preparing. Judge Caldwell and Marcus were brought out of the wagon, given hats, coats, told to keep their heads down and blend in. "If you try to run," Cooper warned, "you will be shot. Not by me, by one of the 20 people here who have a reason to want you dead." Caldwell glared, but said nothing. Marcus just nodded, compliant, broken. Young Daniel Pritchard volunteered to drive the wagon. "I am small, fast. I can jump and roll without getting hurt." His mother protested, but Daniel stood firm. "You said we are fighting for our future. I am part of that future. Let me help." Finally, she agreed. They sent the wagon ahead, Daniel sitting tall on the driver's seat, whip in hand. The horses walking steadily toward the blockade 4 miles away. The rest of the convoy circled wide. 2 miles south, then east, then north again, approaching the ambush from behind. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of slow, careful movement, trying not to make noise, trying not to alert the men waiting ahead. As dawn broke, they could see the blockade, trees dragged across the road, rifle barrels glinting in gaps between the wood. 23 men at least, maybe 25. Frank Yates stood in the center, waiting, confident. The prison wagon approached, slow, steady. One small figure driving. When it was 200 yards away, Frank raised his hand. "Stop the wagon. Release the prisoners or we open fire." Daniel did not respond, just kept driving. 100 yards. "I said stop." 50 yards. "Fire a warning shot." A rifle cracked. The bullet kicked up dirt in front of the horses. They reared, panicked, and Daniel leaped from the seat, rolled, came up running into the brush on the side of the road. The horses, now spooked and driverless, bolted forward. The wagon careened toward the blockade. Men scattered. And in that moment of confusion, Ezra and the convoy struck from behind. It was not a fair fight. Surprise rarely is. Tekotta's warriors came first, silent, deadly, arrows whistling through the dawn. 3 men dropped before anyone even knew they were under attack. Then Ezra with the sharps, the boom of the buffalo gun announcing that the mountain man was here. And he was angry. Then the citizens, farmers and shopkeepers and widows, people who had never fired a gun in anger, but they were fighting for their homes, their dignity, their right to justice. Frank Yates realized too late what had happened. He spun around, saw his men falling, saw the Apache warriors, saw Ezra Callahan walking through the smoke like the angel of death itself. "Fall back!" Frank screamed. But there was nowhere to fall back to. They were pinned between the blockade they had built and the people they had underestimated. Some of Yates' men dropped their weapons, raised their hands. Others tried to run and were cut down, not by bullets, but by ropes, by clubs, by people who wanted justice, not revenge. Frank himself fought to the end, drew his pistol, fired at Ezra, missed. Ezra did not fire back. He just walked forward, grabbed Frank's wrist, twisted. The gun dropped. Then Ezra's fist. Once. Hard. Frank Yates crumpled to the ground. When the dust settled, 15 of Yates' men were captured. 5 were dead. 3 had escaped into the desert. And not a single person from the convoy had been killed. 2 wounded. Daniel Pritchard had a sprained ankle from his jump. Mrs. Pritchard had a graze on her arm from a ricochet. But everyone was alive. Marshal Cooper surveyed the scene. "Tie them up, all of them. They are all coming to Santa Fe to face charges." As the sun rose fully, painting the desert gold, the convoy resumed its journey, larger now. 28 prisoners, 36 citizens, 12 warriors, 1 doctor, 1 blacksmith, 1 mountain man, and 1 half Apache woman who was beginning to understand that she was not a victim anymore. She was a warrior. That afternoon, they crested a hill and saw Santa Fe spread out before them. Adobe buildings, church spires, the federal courthouse standing proud at the center of town. They had made it. Judge Caldwell sat on his horse, chained and defeated. He looked at the town where his crimes would finally be judged, where his power meant nothing, where money could not buy innocence. "This is not over," he muttered. Nayland rode past him. She did not look at him, did not acknowledge him. He was already a ghost, already erased from the world that mattered. She looked ahead, to the courthouse, to justice, to the future, and she smiled, because this was not an ending. It was not revenge. It was the first day of a new world, A world where a half Apache woman could stand tall, where a mountain man could find peace, where ordinary people could be extraordinary when it mattered most. The convoy rode into Santa Fe not as victims, but as victors, and the whole territory would remember what happened when the powerless decided to take their power back. The federal courthouse in Santa Fe was built of stone and adobe, thick walls that had witnessed 1,000 judgments, 1,000 men swearing to tell the truth, 1,000 verdicts that changed lives forever. On a cold November morning in 1874, it would witness something rare, something that would be talked about in law schools and saloons for the next 50 years. True justice. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Marshal Cooper had to turn away 200 more who could not fit inside. They waited outside in the plaza, silent, respectful. Witnesses to history. Judge Theodore Harrison presided, 70 years old, white beard down to his chest, eyes sharp as broken glass. He had been appointed by President Grant himself, known for being fair, unbribable, the kind of man who read the law and followed it, regardless of who it hurt. The territory versus Lucius Caldwell and Marcus Caldwell, the clerk announced. Charges of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Judge Harrison looked at the defendants. Lucius sat ramrod straight, defiant even in chains. Marcus slumped, broken. Two men facing the same charges, but carrying them very differently. The prosecution was led by a federal attorney named Samuel Pierce, 45 years old, balding, nervous energy, but brilliant. He had prosecuted corrupt officials from New Mexico to California, never lost a case when the evidence was solid. And this evidence was very solid. Pierce called his first witness, Sam Wheeler. The old blacksmith walked to the stand, placed his weathered hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Then he opened the ledger, the real ledger, the one that showed 2 years of theft. "This book," Sam said, his voice steady, "documents every shipment Judge Caldwell sold. $42,000 worth of supplies meant for the Apache reservation. Flour, salt, dried beef, medicine, all sold to traders in Albuquerque and El Paso." He turned to a specific page. March 1873. 300 pounds of flour diverted. April 1873. 500 pounds of salt. June 1873. 200 doses of quinine, all recorded, all sold, while children starved. Pierce let that sit for a moment. Then he asked the question that mattered. "Mr. Wheeler, why did you keep this ledger?" "Because my son worked at the reservation. He saw what was happening, started documenting it. When he tried to report it, he had an accident, fell from a horse and broke his neck. Except my son was the best rider in the territory. He did not fall, he was pushed." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Order!" Caldwell's attorney, a slick lawyer from Denver named Hartwell, stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Wheeler, you claim your son was murdered. Do you have proof?" "I have a witness, Apache man named Tall Bear. He saw 2 of Caldwell's men chase my son into the canyon, where he died. He will testify if you give him safe passage." "An Apache witness," Hartwell said dismissively. "How convenient." "My people do not lie about death," came a voice from the back. Dakota stood. "We consider it sacred. If Tall Bear says he saw murder, he saw murder. Question him yourself, if you doubt." Judge Harrison nodded. "Bring this tall bear to testify. This court recognizes Apache testimony as equal to any other." It was a small moment, but monumental. For the first time in territorial history, an Apache voice would be heard in federal court, not as a defendant, but as a witness for justice. The trial continued for 3 days, witness after witness. Mrs. Pritchard testified about how Caldwell had stolen her land. Father Duncan testified about the bribes and threats. Dr. Webb testified about the night they took Nayland from his surgery. On the second afternoon, Tall Bear took the stand. The Apache warrior spoke through a translator, his voice steady and clear. He described in careful detail how he had been hunting near the reservation when he saw 2 of Caldwell's hired men chase Sam's son into Dead Horse Canyon. He watched from the ridge as they cornered the young man, struck him, and pushed him from his horse onto the rocks below. The courtroom sat in absolute silence as he spoke. Even Hartwell had no questions. And then, on the 3rd day, they called Nayland herself. She walked to the witness stand, every eye in the courtroom on her. She wore a simple dress, Apache beadwork at the collar, a gift from Dakota's wife. Her back still ached. The scar would be with her forever. But she stood straight, tall, unashamed. "Miss Nayland," Pierce began gently, "can you tell the court what happened on October 15th? Nayland took a breath. Then she told the story, not as a victim, but as a witness. She described the false arrest of Ezra Callahan, the whipping, the decision to step in front of the lash. "Why did you do it?" Pierce asked. "You barely knew this man." "Because he looked at me like I was human. In a town that spent 12 years telling me I was not, that meant everything." Her voice did not waver, did not break. "I knew the whip would hurt, maybe kill me. But I was tired of dying slowly. Better to die standing up for something than to keep living on my knees." The courtroom was silent, absolutely silent. Even the people outside in the plaza, hearing the testimony through the open windows, stood frozen. Hartwell had no questions for her. What could he ask? She had not lied, had not exaggerated. She had simply told the truth. And the truth was devastating. The final witness was unexpected. Marcus Caldwell himself. His father's attorney tried to stop it, tried to invoke his right to silence, but Marcus refused. "I want to speak," he said. Judge Harrison allowed it. Marcus walked to the stand. He looked smaller than he had in Prescott, prison clothes hanging loose on his frame, face gaunt, eyes haunted. "I am guilty," he said simply, "of everything they say. I whipped Mr. Callahan. I struck Miss Nayland. I helped my father steal from people who could not defend themselves." His voice cracked. "I told myself it was not my fault, that she jumped in the way, that I was just following orders. But those are lies. I did it because I was weak, because hurting people made me feel strong, because my father taught me that power comes from fear." He looked at his father. Lucius stared straight ahead, refusing to meet his son's eyes. "But I was wrong. Power does not come from fear. It comes from respect, from doing right, even when it is hard. Miss Nayland taught me that. She forgave Father Duncan, showed mercy when she could have chosen hate." Marcus turned to Nayland. "I do not ask for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I want you to know I am sorry, truly sorry. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better." Hartwell looked furious. His client had just confessed, destroyed any chance of acquittal. But Marcus did not care. The confession was not strategy, it was cleansing. The first honest thing he had said in years. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood, cleared his throat. "We find Lucius Caldwell guilty on all counts. We find Marcus Caldwell guilty on all counts." Judge Harrison nodded. "Sentencing will be tomorrow at noon." Before the courtroom could empty, Harrison called for order once more. "The court will also address the matter of Frank Yates and his men." The 15 captured gunmen were brought in chains before the bench. "You have been found guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy, and assault on federal officers. This court sentences each of you to 8 years hard labor." Yates stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Justice had caught up with him at last. That night, the townspeople from Prescott gathered in a small cantina, celebrating, not with wild abandon, but with quiet satisfaction. The satisfaction of people who had done something hard and necessary and right. Ezra sat in the corner nursing a whiskey. Nayland found him there. "You are not celebrating," she said. "I am not much for crowds." She sat beside him. They watched the others. Sam Wheeler arm-wrestling Daniel Pritchard. Mrs. Pritchard teaching Dakota's wife how to play poker. Dr. Webb and Father Duncan arguing good-naturedly about scripture. "What happens now?" Nayland asked. "Tomorrow they get sentenced. Then we go home." "Where is home for you?" Ezra was quiet for a long moment. "I have a cabin. Sangre de Cristo Mountains, 10,000 feet up. Closest neighbor is 20 miles away. It is cold, hard, lonely." He paused. "But it could be less lonely, if you wanted." Nayland felt her heart hammer. "You are asking me to come with you." "I'm asking you to choose. Stay in Prescott. Rebuild your life there. You have friends now. People who see you. Or come to the mountains. Learn a different way to live. Either way, you are free. No one owns your choices anymore." "What do you want?" Ezra finally looked at her, his eyes soft in the lamplight, like winter sky after snow. "I want you to be happy, whatever that means." Nayland thought about Prescott, about the general store where she had hauled flour for 12 years, about the people who had ignored her suffering until she made them pay attention. Then she thought about the mountains, about freedom, about a life where she could define herself instead of being defined by others. "I need to think," she said. "Take all the time you need." The next day, the courthouse was even more packed. Sentencing day always drew crowds. People wanted to see justice delivered, wanted to hear the gavel fall. Judge Harrison entered. Everyone stood. He sat. Everyone else followed. Lucius Caldwell approached the bench. The former judge walked forward, still defiant, still convinced this was all a mistake that money could fix eventually. "You have been found guilty of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The harm you caused is incalculable. Children died because of your greed. Families were destroyed. An entire community lived in fear." Harrison's voice was ice. "This court sentences you to 20 years hard labor at Yuma Territorial Prison. No possibility of parole. Your assets will be seized and returned to the Apache Reservation. Your land holdings will be auctioned. The proceeds will go to the families you harmed." Lucius opened his mouth to protest, but Harrison cut him off. "Take him away." Then Marcus was called forward. "Marcus Caldwell, you have also been found guilty. However, this court notes your cooperation, your confession, your apparent remorse." Harrison leaned forward. "You are young, 26 years old. You have the opportunity to become something your father never was, an honest man. But that choice is yours. Prison can break you or remake you. The decision is not mine. It is yours." He paused. "This court sentences you to 10 years, eligible for parole in 5 if you demonstrate genuine reform. Use that time wisely." Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Your Honor." As the deputies led both Caldwells away, Nayland felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, but sadness. Sadness for Marcus, who had been poisoned by his father's teachings. Sadness for Lucius, who would die in prison, never understanding what he had done wrong. But also relief. Relief that this chapter was closing, that justice had been served, that she could finally move forward. The convoy stayed in Santa Fe for 2 more days, resting, recuperating, preparing for the journey home. On the 3rd day, Dakota found Nayland. "I am leaving tomorrow, going back to the reservation. Sam Wheeler will be the new agent. He is a good man. My people will have food, medicine, maybe even schools someday. I am happy for you." "Come with us," Dakota said. "You are Apache. You belong with your people." Nayland looked at her brother. This man she had lost and found again. "Part of me is Apache, but part of me is white. I cannot choose one and abandon the other. I need to find a place where I can be both." Dakota smiled. "You already have. That place is inside you. Geography does not matter. You carry both worlds in your heart." They embraced. Not goodbye, but see you later. Nayland promised to visit, to bring supplies, to help however she could, but she would not stay at the reservation. That was not her path. On the morning they left Santa Fe, Nayland made her decision. She found Ezra preparing his horse, the Appaloosa snorting in the cold air, eager to return to high country. "I want to come with you," Nayland said. "To the mountains." Ezra stopped, turned. "You are sure?" "No, but I am willing to try. You said the land does not lie, does not pretend. I need that honesty. I have lived in lies too long." "It will be hard. Winters are brutal. Food is scarce. You will work harder than you ever have." "I have been working hard my whole life. At least in the mountains, I will be working for myself." Ezra smiled then, a real smile. The first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter. "Then let us go home." They rode out of Santa Fe with Dr. Webb, Sam Wheeler, and the others. But at the fork in the road, they split. The townspeople heading west to Prescott, Ezra and Nayland heading north to the mountains. Mrs. Pritchard hugged Nayland. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you send word." "I will. Thank you for standing up, for changing. Thank you for showing us how." Sam Wheeler shook Ezra's hand. "Take care of her. She can take care of herself, but I will stand beside her." And then they were alone, just the two of them, riding into wilderness. 6 months later, spring 1875. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains were painted green and gold, snow melting into rushing streams, wildflowers blooming in meadows that had been buried under ice for months, the air sweet with pine and possibility. A cabin sat at 10,000 feet, sturdy logs, thick roof, smoke curling from the chimney, a corral with 2 horses, a garden plot freshly turned, furs stretched on racks, meat drying in the sun. Nayland stood on the porch, looking out over the valley. She wore buckskin pants, Apache-style moccasins, a wool shirt Ezra had made. Her hair was longer now, braided with beads Dakota had sent. The scar on her back still ached when storms came, but it was not a mark of shame. It was a badge of honor, proof that she had survived, had chosen courage over safety. Ezra came up the path from the creek, string of trout in his hand. He was laughing, actually laughing, at something. The mountain man, who had been silent and solitary for 15 years, now laughed at the simple joy of catching fish. "Good day?" Nayland asked. "Every day up here is good." They cleaned the fish together, cooked them over an open fire, ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes when two people do not need words to understand each other. After dinner, Nayland pulled out a leather-bound journal. She had been writing in it for months, recording their story, recording the lessons she had learned. "What will you call it?" Ezra asked. "The truth about belonging." "And what is the truth?" Nayland thought about that. About Prescott. About the whip. About the trial. About this cabin in the mountains where she finally felt at home. The truth is that belonging is not about blood. It is not about geography. It is about finding people who see you, who value you, who stand beside you when the world tries to knock you down. She looked at Ezra. "I spent 12 years trying to belong to a town that did not want me. Now I belong to myself, and that is enough." Ezra reached over, took her hand. More than enough. That night, as stars filled the sky like diamonds scattered on velvet, Nayland wrote the final entry in her journal. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. "People ask me if I regret standing in front of that whip. I tell them no. That was the moment I chose myself. The moment I stopped waiting for permission to be whole." Ezra Morrison never returned to civilization. And I never returned to hiding. We built something new here, something that does not care about blood or color or the labels people put on us. We built freedom. Prescott changed after we left. Sam Wheeler served as Indian agent for 11 years, ensuring every ration reached the reservation. He died in 1885, mourned by Apache and white families alike. Mrs. Pritchard's school educated over 200 children in both English and Apache before she passed in 1899. Dr. Webb continued practicing medicine until he was 81, never once charging an Apache patient. Father Duncan spent his final 7 years translating Apache oral histories and died peacefully in 1882, forgiven by the people he had wronged. The town is not perfect. Nowhere is perfect. But it is better because ordinary people stood up, because they chose justice over comfort, because a half-blood woman showed them that courage is not about being fearless. It is about doing right, even when you are terrified. I learned something from the mountain man, something my mother tried to teach me before they took me away. Strength is not about how much you can carry. Strength is about carrying your burdens and still choosing kindness, still choosing hope, still choosing to stand. I have scars now, on my back, on my heart. But scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof you survived the storm, proof you fought, proof you are still here. And I am still here, on this mountain, free, whole, Belonging to myself. That is the truth I want daughters of half-bloods to know. You do not need permission to be whole. You just need courage. And one person who sees you for who you really are. I found that person, and in finding him, I found myself. The whip tried to break me. Instead, it made me. And I will never apologize for taking up space again. Naylin closed the journal, placed it on the shelf beside medical texts and hunting guides and maps of territories she had never seen but would someday explore. She walked outside. The night was cold but clear, the kind of cold that makes you feel alive, that reminds you that breathing is a gift. Ezra joined her. They stood side by side, looking at stars that had witnessed everything, that would be here long after they were gone. "Do you miss it?" Ezra asked. "Civilization?" "Sometimes. I miss people, conversations. But I do not miss the cruelty, the judgment, the constant feeling of being less. You were never less. I know that now." They stood in silence for a while. Then Naylin said something that surprised them both. "We should build a bigger cabin, make room for visitors, for people who need a place to heal, to hide, to find themselves." Ezra looked at her. "You want to help others." "I was helped. Now I help. That is how it works." Over the next year, they did exactly that. Built rooms, made space. And slowly, one by one, people came. A runaway slave from Texas, a Chinese railroad worker escaping violence, a widow fleeing an abusive family, an Apache boy who did not fit on the reservation. They all found refuge on that mountain, found acceptance, found the freedom to become who they were meant to be. And Naylin taught them all the same lesson, the lesson the whip had taught her. You are not broken. You are not less. You are exactly who you need to be. And if the world does not see that, the world is wrong, not you. Years later, when Naylin was old and her hair was white as snow, a young girl came to the mountain, Mexican and Apache, rejected by both, angry, hurt, lost. Naylin sat with her, showed her the scar on her back. "This is from a whip," Naylin said. "It was meant to silence me. Instead, it gave me a voice. Pain can destroy you, or it can teach you. The choice is yours." "How do I choose teaching?" the girl asked. "You stand up. You speak truth. You refuse to be invisible. And you find people who will stand with you. They are out there, I promise." The girl stayed on the mountain for 2 years, learned to hunt, to heal, to be strong without being cruel, to be soft without being weak. When she left, she carried Naylin's journal, the truth about belonging. She would read it to her own children someday, and they would read it to theirs. And the story of the Apache woman who took the whip would never die, would be passed down through generations, a reminder that justice is not given, it is taken, that freedom is not granted, it is claimed, that belonging does not come from others, it comes from within. In the autumn of 1910, 36 years after the whipping, Naylin died peacefully in her sleep. Ezra was beside her. Their cabin was full of people, former refugees, now family. They buried her on the mountain, under an aspen tree that turned gold every fall. Her grave marker was simple, just her name, and one line. She stood when others knelt. And in Prescott, Arizona, now a thriving town of 5,000, A monument stood in the square, a bronze statue of a woman, face lifted to the sky, arms spread wide, taking up space without apology. No name on the plaque, just words. To those who stand for justice, 1874. Everyone knew who it was for. Everyone remembered the day the half-blood woman took the whip. The day the mountain man taught them that true power comes from protecting the weak. The day ordinary people became heroes. And children growing up in that town were taught the story. Taught that courage is not about being strong. It is about standing up even when you are terrified. That justice requires action. That change begins when one person decides enough is enough. The whip tried to break Nayland. Instead, it broke the system that held her down. And that is the truth about belonging. You do not need the world's permission to be whole. You just need your own. The story of the Apache woman and the mountain man became legend. But legends are just truths that people remember long after the facts fade. And this truth would be remembered forever. Stand up, speak out, take the whip if you must, but never, ever stop fighting for justice. Because the world changes when ordinary people do extraordinary things. And it only takes one person standing up to inspire 1,000 more. That person was Nayland, and her legacy lives on in every person who refuses to be invisible, who takes up space, who stands when others kneel. The whip could not break her. Nothing could. And that is how the story ends, not with revenge, not with hate, but with freedom, with healing, with hope, the way all good stories should.